So this is the Teradyne compressor here. What you hear running right now is the dryer. I don't know what. There we go. So the dryer runs on timer. It tries to maintain a target dew point of between 34 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Basically what that means, as long as it doesn't get between those temperatures here in the building, which I'm sure it won't because it's climate controlled, you won't see moisture downline unless there's an issue with the dryer. Currently the dryer is set up because it's in timer mode for a safe air supply, which means that it won't alarm and shut off the compressor if anything should happen to the dryer. Now we can change that, but that'll mean if there's any problems with the dryer, then the compressor will shut off and you won't have air at all in the system. But if you want, we can do that for you. No?
Say no.
Okay.
Yeah. Seems like it's set the way it should be.
Yeah. Okay, sounds good. Basic general use, green button's on, red button's off. So when you press the red button, the green LED is no longer illuminated and the machine is off, and you'll see up here on the controller, it also says off up here. If we're looking at the controller here, up at the top on the left is the pressure. So we've got 114 PSI right now. That's being read by a transducer inside the unit. And then 171 degrees Fahrenheit is the temperature at the air end discharge. That's the basically it boils down to being the operating temperature of the unit. Kaiser recommends anywhere between 165 and 185 for a general rule of operating temperature. That's hot enough to cook off any of the moisture, but low enough temperature with the oil that's in there to not start vaporizing the oil, passing it through the separator, or shortening the life of the oil and the lubrication qualities. Right now, this is only set to, because this is the only compressor you can set if you had multiples of lead lag, but it's set for 125 minus 10, I believe. I'm going to go in here and double check that. 125 minus 15. So what that means is at 110 psi, it cuts in. At 125 psi, it cuts off. Would you like to make any changes to that pressure band?
No, I don't think so. That should
No.
be fine.
Okay. We can set up, if you would like, a clock function where this guy turns on, let's say at 5 a.m. every day and shuts off at 5 p.m. every day, Monday through Friday. Running constantly?
Yep.
Okay, sounds good. So then basically all that you guys will need to do while you're running it constantly is have this on and make sure that it's this green LED is illuminated. You'll see it says ready here on the controller. That means it's ready to load as soon as the demand is met. So that means once you get below 110 psi, this guy will kick on and start making air up into 125 psi where it will cut off. This unit is rated for 125 psi. So with the pulleys that are on here, this safety pressure relief valve that is on here, it can only be set up to 125 psi. If you in the future wanted to go to a higher pressure, you could. We would just have to do a pressure change, and we would change out the pulleys, change the belt, change the safety pressure switch, all that kind of stuff, and we could get you a higher pressure if you ever wanted. Right here, I'm going to start up the compressor. It's going to run. You'll see that this light is blinking. We are now in forced idle condition. With this light blinking, the unit will run all day, every day, and never make it. It's for maintenance and for troubleshooting that we have like a forced idle condition on the controller. But otherwise you never want it sitting in that condition. If you guys want, I can lock out this button so that you won't ever, nobody will accidentally press it and have the compressor running and things like that.
Yeah, I would say so.
So now that you see it solid, that just means that the controller is telling it to run in an idle condition. This is because we're 1 psi away from the cut-in pressure, so it's going to want to keep running to make sure that it doesn't have an excessive amount of motor starts, because an excessive amount of motor starts will wear out the motor switcher. And also the control mode that it's in, it's going to run, reach pressure, and then idle for 2 minutes before shutting off. That's so that we can reach a good operating temperature to cook off moisture. Otherwise, you build up moisture in there, and it causes rust and other problems. So, but I'm going to go ahead and lock that key out. So now it's locked out. Can't change it unpressing that. So we're at 110 psi. We're probably going to drop here shortly. Oh, now it's loaded. So you see the solid arrow, the LED's now illuminated. It says on load here on the controller. So we're loading up, building pressure, and making air. It means it's loading and making the air. When it's the not filled in arrow, that means that it's in idle. It's just running to create internal pressure here so the oil is moving throughout the system, but it's not actually making any more pressure. So now it'll idle. I'm going to stop this right now. Typically it would run for 2 minutes and then shut off by itself unless the demand is met before then, and then it would load back up. Again, that mode is to ensure that you're not having an excessive amount of motor starts.
Us powering down doesn't depressurize the lines outside.
Right.
Here,
No, it does not, as long
we
as
go do something to depressurize.
Right. So if this was shut off and we're running, creating demand out in the production, then yeah, eventually you drop down all the way to 0 if this isn't making any more air.
Okay.
But right now you've got the 120 something psi there. So I just want to show you guys in here real quick. I'll actually do this. So if we go ahead and press this button, you'll see we've got a flashing light here, and then a message on the screen. So this is for an alarm. An alarm will show a red light here, and you'll get a message on the screen. There's an other kind of indicator that's a warning. It'll be this wrench light. It's used for maintenance counters. It's also used for warnings of the machine. We'll take the operating temperature as an example. At 215 degrees Fahrenheit, the controller is set to give you a warning of an ADT high, which means air end discharge temperature high. That's a higher than usual, normal, and temperature rating. You don't want it to run that long at that temperature. You'll start vaporizing the oil. The oil will be carried over out into the plant and out of the unit and stop lubricating, as well as it won't be lubricating as well as it should be. At 215 degrees, an alarm will show up. When the message is on the screen, you can hit this, which is called the hamburger button. We call that because it looks like a hamburger. You press that, it will acknowledge the alarm. The message on the screen will go away, but the alarm remains, and you won't be able to start the unit until you remedy the situation of the alarm. In this case, it's the emergency stop with depress. If it's an air end discharge temperature high warning alarm, it'll be until the temperature drops below the 230 that the alarm sets off, and then you could start the compressor again. If it continues to alarm, then you'll want to give us a call. Our emergency number's here. Call and leave a message. We have customers that'll call and call and call. There's not always somebody sitting there at the desk, but there's no way to know that you called if you don't leave a message. So you call, leave a message, someone will get back to you promptly. So that is warnings and alarms on the controller. So in here in the unit, we've got our inlet air filter here. The inlet air is actually taken from the back of the unit here. There's a little grate, brings in the ambient air, filters it through here. You have 3 valves that control the loading and unloading of the unit. One of them is here between the cooler that's back there and this paneling. It's called your minimum pressure check valve. You've got your combined control vent valve with a solenoid load valve here. A lot of other manufacturers use a load valve and a vent valve. Kaiser's got them all in one right there. And then you've got your inlet valve. What happens when the controller decides to load is the LED on the solenoid lights up to let you know, but the solenoid energizes. It sends a pneumatic signal to the inlet valve at 30 psi. This inlet valve opens all the way, allowing a full flow of the ambient air into the inlet valve to the air end to start compressing the air. That is then discharged here. When we talk about the air end discharge temperature, oh, it's actually over here. It comes into the sump tank here. That's back here. The sensor for that is right here. Comes into the air oil separator. There's a plate in there that causes the air and oil to move around the separator tank in a centrifugal motion. Kaiser claims that 94% of the air oil separation happens through the centrifugal force that occurs in there. All the other oil that's still in the air gets separated by this air oil separator here. Now you'll always have a little bit of carryover, but there's a scavenging system in there that'll take away the oil on the dry side of the separator and bring it back into the air end. You've got your oil filter here, but once you build up internal pressure of 60 psi, then your minimum pressure check valve opens, and that allows air to go out to the plant. We provide preventative maintenance services depending on how often the compressor will run. There's minors, PMs, and major PMs. Minors, we would just do air filter, or actually this is a spin-on separator, so this one's a little bit different, I'm sorry. You would only ever really want to do a major PM on this because these oil separators have the spin-on ones have a less hour life than the inserts. So those are at every 4,000 hours. You're going to want to change the spin-on separator, oil filter, oil, air filter, and then every 8,000 hours, so every other PM, you'd want to change the belts, and we check the tension. I'm actually checking it right now because I'll show you on here. I'm going to reset a maintenance counter. Part of the startup is coming back and checking the belt tension and condition, and it all looks good, and the tension here. If you could see, there's a little diamond shape. There's a top triangle and then a bottom triangle here. When they're lined up perfectly, that means you've got good tension. And halfway, which is where we reset it on an in-between PM if we're not changing the belts, is you'd want this bottom one halfway in the top triangle there. Then you've got your integrated dryer here that treats the air. Compressor, condenser, you got condenser fan, all the things of a refrigerant dryer. There's also a condensate drain there that is taking out the condensate and putting it into your oil and water removal system, or KCS, condensate management system, that's back there. Separating, the oil gets separated out, the water goes down into the ground water there. Back here, you guys could take a look at that. There's a drain down here. It's got a hose that's leading to nowhere. This is a dry tank. So if you ever do get moisture in here, it will spill out some water on the floor, but that's what you want because you want to know that you have a problem with your dryer and that there's water in your tank. Okay. If this gets all filled up and you don't know about it because it's just sending the water down there, then you're going to have even a lot more problems. So this is designed and meant to just kind of spill out onto the floor so that you know that you've got a problem. There's also an oil removal or a coalescing filter, line filter right here as well. Any other questions, comments, concerns?
Did you say we have a service contract with?
So yeah, well, I guess to get a sense, how often will you said this will be running 24/7? So probably in about 6 months then we will contact you letting you know it's time for your first PM service. And we'll come out based on the hours on the machine. We'll let you know if you need the PM, and if you do, we'll perform that service. But I would probably recommend, with how often you're going to run it and the fact that you've got a spin-on separator, doing it every 6 months, doing a full PM, changing the oil, separator, oil filter, and all that.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, and then we'll keep track of that too. I've got that sticker on there for that. So I'm going to go ahead and reset maintenance counter in here for the belt and tension, which was set at 500 from the factory. That's because after the startup, they have us come check the condition and the tension of the belts at that time. and you only had about 100 hours left on that. That way you don't have to have us back out here to do that. And I will change that now to 3,000. That should be.
So I'll probably grab like a bin for the spill.
Yeah, it's probably not a bad idea.
Yeah, you could do that and go into a bucket. That way, if you're checking the bucket every day, you'll know.
How often do you recommend checking the bucket?
You probably only need to check it about once a week. If you got a problem, you'll know it. But otherwise, there shouldn't be any condensate that gets into that bucket. It all should, as long as the dryer is functioning and taking the water or the moisture out, and you don't get down to below 42 degrees in here, then you shouldn't have moisture in your line or condensing moisture into the tank.
Right.